First of all, I have to be very honest and tell you that I'm a bit anxious coming before you today. In fact, the reason I was a bit late was the speech that was prepared for me by my normally capable writers was something that left a lot to be desired. So we wound up tackling it for about an hour and a half, and the end result being, I was reminded of the phrase that says something like, "The enemy of good is perfect." In other words, I am writing the speech while delivering it. And the pressure obviously comes because I am speaking before an esteemed Jesuit institution. And I wonder if before I get back to Manila, we're leaving tonight, if there will be protests from Loyola Marymount at the quality of the education I got from the university I went to. Hopefully, I will do justice to all of them. Okay. How do I start out? Perhaps I should explain to me what a Jesuit education meant. And the first concept I want to share with you is, I think we were in our senior year, first semester, and one of our professors said, if we were successful at this point in time, hopefully you know that you do not know. And we looked at it with really bewildered expressions. After all of the hours, days, months of cramming everything that you asked us to read, for instance, in one subject, I'm an economics major, the final exam consisted of a question for every book that we had to undergo. For instance, there was a book called Asian Drama by Gunnar Myrdal. If I remember correctly, it was 3 volumes. He's a Nobel Prize winner. And there were 3 volumes. If I remember correctly, again, about 1,200 pages per volume, and the total number of questions numbering 2 to cover that entire book. Okay. So after cramming all of these facts, figures, statistics, all of the concepts, trying to imbibe them, trying to really understand all of them, our professor starts this day in class by saying, "I hope now you know that you do not know." And he explained it this way. You can be anybody if all you have to do is recite by rote memory that which was imparted to you. What we hope to have been able to accomplish is that we have developed in you an ability to think. And that in turn led to perhaps our ability to accept concepts. Like when John F. Kennedy said, people see things as the way they are, and they ask why. I see the same things and I'm paraphrasing, I ask, why not? And what does that translate to us? Why do you have to accept the status quo when the status quo does not really address that which is needed by man? And another instance was, we had a professor in political science by the name of Miss Advencula. And her task was to teach us the Constitution. And this was the period where we had martial law. And the dictator reserved unto himself the capacity to change the Constitution at any time and on any whim. And she asked one day, when I look at your faces, I see the faces of students questioning why they have to study something which is supposed to be the fundamental law of the land, only to exist in a universe where tomorrow it may cease to be the fundamental law of the land. Where is the relevance of that which you're asked not just to read, but to memorize and take to heart? And she said, today, this is the situation. Tomorrow, it may not be. Tomorrow, you may be holding the reins of power. And tomorrow, if you do not know the difference between right and wrong, how can anyone expect you or your generation to do that which is right? And she says, that is my mission, to teach you right from wrong, so that when the time comes that you do hold the reins of power, you will do that which is right. Of course, at that point in time, you were so caught up in the paper chase, in attaining the right grades, etc., and even overcoming the challenge of why would one want to better himself when one expects that this condition will end in a bloody civil war, where the people at the forefront will never reach the conclusion? What's the point in improving yourself when you thought that there was no future for you? Okay. And of course, perhaps the central tenet in the Jesuit education afforded to me, I spent my basic education, the middle portion, and the tertiary portion all in a Jesuit institution. The only other institution I went to was run by also a Catholic school, kindergarten, and its main influence on me was that in kindergarten we were expected to be trilingual, English, Filipino, and Spanish. Now, the third aspect that I think was really impressed on all of us in our generation was that of being a man for others. The be-all and end-all of our existence here is how does it relate to the bettering of the condition of the other, which flows from Christ and God's admonition that the greatest commandment is to love one another as you love me. Now, I just spent the last couple of days in Palm Springs with my fellow ASEAN leaders and President Obama. And we've had so much discussions on so many different topics. So President Obama and I find ourselves more or less in the same situation. We're about to end our term, in his case, his terms. And we're thinking, and sometimes our conversation revolves around what are we going to do after our respective terms. So sometime before Christmas, I had the opportunity when he was at the APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Conference in Manila, to share with him an experience I had viewing two American films. No? I said, if you have the time, these were two that helped shape what I am today. Perhaps at the very least, I'm sure they will entertain you. Perhaps it will rekindle exactly the challenges that we had to go through. He's younger than me. He's, I think 3 years younger than me. And the films are The Cardinal, and the other one was The Shoes of the Fisherman with Anthony Quinn. May I concentrate on The Cardinal? The Cardinal talks of the life of a person who eventually became a cardinal, who started as a priest on the fast track. And it seemed like for every situation in that early part of his career, he had, how should I put it, dogmatic answers to any and every situation. One of the challenges that he had at the beginning of the film was he had a sister who wanted to marry a person of the Jewish persuasion. And initially, the Jewish guy agreed to be converted. There was a party to get the two families together. The family of the Jewish individual was slighted, and they withdrew their blessing on the union. The younger sister of the main character went to her brother, a priest, and asked, how do I resolve this situation? I am so in love with him. I believe he is the right man for me. But there's so much tension that had been built up. And I really don't want to deprive you of the opportunity to experience it. But the bottom line is that he gave an answer which was probably, in a sense, correct, but was delivered more or less in a mechanical fashion as opposed to considering the other person as a real person. So the film basically traces his growth as a person of faith. And why was it such a significant experience in my life? In our country, we celebrate Holy Week, and the country shuts down from Wednesday up to Easter Sunday. And even programming and the media at that point in time will turn into very religious films. And in the films, normally they'll be portrayed either the life of Christ or other saints. And the saints seem to have undergone challenges that were no challenges, because even from the time that they were, shall we say, born out of their parents, they were already saintly. They were unreachable. They're different from all of us. And the Cardinal showed me a person who had to deal with realities of his situation and his own personal growth as to how to achieve this. Now, perhaps I can use the words of a colleague of mine in Congress when he said, our difficulty is always being able to say that we can, by default, choose the difficult right over the easy wrong. It's so easy to compromise in so many things. In our country, they keep on talking about being practical as opposed to being idealistic. They talk of people who have idealism as being do-gooders who will never amount to anything, who will never be able to produce anything. So, when we, sorry, this is stream of consciousness thing that I'm trying to deliver. But, I was very fortunate to go to this college, to go to that institution, where we had programs like immersion, wherein people of wealth, of status, were able to be brought to communities who had nothing and experienced life on the other side of the spectrum. They showed us the conditions. They asked us to ask ourselves the question whether or not this was right or this was wrong. They gave us the necessary tools to be able to effect the changes of that which was wrong and to do it by doing that which is right. It always told us to measure all of our actions on the basis of how does it affect the, the other. The emphasis on your interests having to be subsumed, no, to take care first and primarily of the interests of the other. Now, it just told us, well, we were taught not just that this was the right thing to do on a moral basis, but in the end, it even on a practical consideration, it is the right thing to do. The moral imperative does not become, I would say, an abstract discussion, but rather on any mode, any filter, any standard that you would want to put, doing that which is right is the only course that will really redound to attaining any of your respective goals. Okay. Now, how does that affect the life that we have had to lead? My father was partially educated by a Jesuit institution. His generation was the generation that had to be educated after World War II. And after World War II, Manila was, I understand, second most devastated country after Warsaw, Poland. So institutions started opening up, not simultaneously, but one after the other. There was even a time that he went to a high school that was supposed to be, at least prior to the war, exclusively for women. But since that was the only institution open at that point in time, he was allowed to enter. Now, I saw in his life, I saw in my mother's life, I had an institution that perhaps taught me the abstract. I had parents that showed me the reality of what it is to have a principled life and how you you will be able to, even if you cannot imagine that you can capacitate yourself to mount these challenges, that all it really had to take was to continue in that belief and let God take care of those that which you cannot have or you cannot do. Now, let me give you a for instance. My father was in solitary confinement for most of the 7 years, 7 months of his incarceration. At that point in time, we were in a martial law regime. All sources of information were controlled by the state. People could not gather with more than three without being charged with illegal assembly. There was a law that was widely abused called the anti-subversion law, which was designed to be an anti-communist law, but got translated into an, if anybody criticized our dictator then, no, you were branded as a subversive. And then you wound up in jail to be tried by a military tribunal. And the final reviewing authority was Mr. Marcos himself. Okay. Bottom line was, how do you educate your people? How do you proceed from that education into action when you can't even talk to your people, when you had no access to your people? My father's access to the outside community was basically through us. You know, my mother, my siblings, time to time, some of his siblings would also be there. Anything that he wanted to say to everybody else, we had to painstakingly reproduce by either a photocopying machine or a mimeograph machine. And the younger generation probably will not know what a mimeograph machine is. We weren't talking about bandwidth then, but number of pages that we could copy, number of ink cartridges that were available. Now, at one point he said, as a young, I was 12 years old when martial law started about, and the point in exile, I was wondering, why is it that if we are doing that which is right, why are we the ones in exile? Why are we the ones with such an uncertain future? Why are we the ones who are made to suffer all of these things? And then I look back at his own example. 7 years, 7 months. My dad is a very social individual. The worst punishment that you can give him is to deprive him access to people, being able to. For 7 years and 7 months, the only persons that he talked to besides his family was the guard that was watching over his cell. And one lesson that he told me then was, and I think he was quoting the Bible, if the time is right, there is no need, there's not a single prophet is needed. But if the time is right, if the time is not right, 1,000 prophets doesn't make a difference. So he did envision a time that we will, from a position of martial law where he was so oppressed to the point in time that we would regain democracy. And he had that dream, he lived that dream, he lived it up to the last days of his life. And at that time, it says I marveled. How do you keep the dream when it seems to be such an impossible dream? And by the way, that was actually one of his favorite songs from Man of La Mancha. Yeah. And the lyrics really seem to apply, you know, to beat the unbeatable foe. And that's what you're doing. Reach the unreachable star. That seems to be what you're doing. Again, that is my blessing. I saw in a person not just the theoretical aspect, but really living that life of really being dedicated to somebody else. Right now, which brings me to the point of this latter part of my journey. When I was in Congress and in the Senate, I thought my role primarily was that of fiscalizer, try and stop abuses by those who had more power, more senior than I was. When I left the Senate, stenographers were saying that they expected a rather easier time, especially during the budget process, because they seemed to think that I had more than 70% of the questions propounded during the budget season. They actually said that when I got to the Senate, that was the first time that they ran out of cassettes, amongst other things, and flash drives to record all of the questions, and even the stenographic paper when they were making their notes. Now, when I was being asked to run for the presidency, I said, where is the justice there? I was trying to stop all of these abuses, or stop these problems from happening to begin with. And now you're going to ask me to solve all of them. And you're going to be mad at me after a year or two because you're going to say you haven't solved all of them. No. And I'm not a martyr nor a masochist. Why should I willingly get into a situation that was so impossible? And at the end of the day, and my mother had just passed on at that point in time, on the 40th day after she died, I felt I had to make a decision. And part of the grieving process had to be put aside and answer this question. We have a chance, and that was a fundamental question. We have a chance to make a difference, and a significant difference at that. The challenge is, do we shirk away from this challenge and give our people no chance, or take on that challenge and at least give them the possibility of that chance at really changing the situation? Our newspapers at that point in time were always so full of stories that basically said record numbers of our countrymen were leaving the country. Too many people were voting with their feet and leaving. When I started in office, we had about 10% of our population outside of the country. And when you look at all of the problems before you, let me give you something simple. When first days in office, we inherited a backlog in classrooms of 66,800. The national budget can support 8,000 classrooms per year. Given a 6-year term, that's 48,000 classrooms. If we do that, if we're able to do that, I still would have about 20,000 or so in a backlog by the time I leave. How do we actually take care of that? I'm happy to report that we finished that particular backlog in 2013 through various means. The budgetary support, donations from the private sector, public-private partnership programs, and we will actually be producing over 180,000 classrooms by the time I step down in office in June. Out of the things that we managed to accomplish, we didn't even dream about doing at that point in time. How do we settle the seemingly intractable problem of poverty in the country? We have a program called the Conditional Cash Transfer Program. And the primary condition is keep your child in school, you get a government stipend. It's not a very big stipend. But the bottom line is, from roughly about 790,000 households when we got into office, we are now assisting 4.4 million households in keeping their children in school. And the final target of 4.6 million households will be accomplished by this year. Okay. There is a first cohort We expanded the program to assist up to the high school level. The first cohort has graduated last year, and it produced about over 300,000 assisted students, 13,000 plus of whom were honor students. The two who spoke actually wound up in the University of the Philippines in a quota course in engineering. We have graduated something like 1 million in our technical vocational work scholarship program. And the placement rate for all of these graduates from a low of 28% when we started out to about 71, 72% currently, which is defined as finding a job 6 months after graduation from the program. We believe also that the taxes that they pay in the first year of employment will already cover the cost of getting them through that program. So this becomes a self-perpetuating and self-generating endeavor. Now, we have, I can go on and on with the list of the things that I keep saying we have done. I keep saying I have not done all of these things. It is the people who elected me into office. It is the people who provide me with the backbone when I have to challenge all of the vested interests. It is the people who continuously express their support for the things that we are trying to do in reordering and changing our society. Again, let me emphasize that the education I got from the Ateneo de Manila primarily imbued us with the necessary skills to be a good technocrat, but more importantly, a good technocrat in service of the other, of being a man for other, man or woman for, for the other. The difficulty in trying to write this speech was I had to reflect on 56 years of my life. And I was hoping to be able to do all the main points in 10 minutes or less. Right now, I'm beginning to feel my mother at my back saying, they have other things to do. You might want to move on. But honestly, I really have to say, this is a I wanted to share with you lyrics from two songs and wind up with a quote from Pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer. The song is again from the movie The Cardinal, and if you get to see the film, you will notice that the main theme has no lyrics. But Frank Sinatra at some point in time decided that it deserved a lot of lyrics, and in a sense, it encapsulates my own journey as to how to become a better Christian, if not a better Catholic. And if I may quote, it says, "Should my heart not be humble, should my eyes fall to see, should my feet sometimes stumble on the way, stay with me. Like the lamb that in springtime wanders far from the fold, comes the darkness and the frost, I get lost, I grow cold. I grow cold, I grow weary, and I know I have sinned. And I go seeking shelter, and I cry in the wind. And though I grope and I blunder and I kneel and I'm wrong, though the road buckles under where I walk along, till I find to my wonder every task leads to thee, or that I can do it, pray, stay with me, stay with me. May I wind up with a quote from Pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was executed in a concentration camp in Germany during World War II. He stated, "First, they came for the communists, but I was not a communist, so I did not speak out. Then they came for the socialists and the trade unionists, but I was neither, so I did not speak out. Then they came for the Jews, but I was not a Jew, so I did not speak out. And when they came for me, there was no one left to speak out for me." And I guess that encapsulates what we have been trying to do. There are so many who are disenfranchised, who are powerless, who are in a condition that really can make them so despondent, so cynical, so hopeless, but yet they strive in their daily lives. And if there was one mission that we sought out, those who have joined us in this quest, is that we have to maximize opportunities for all. And in the end, that is not just a thing to do, that is the right thing to do. Thank you. Good day.